Let's be honest, the world of academic writing is going through a massive shakeup right now. If you're a scholar, a researcher, or just anyone trying to keep up, the old rulebook doesn't quite cut it anymore. So in this explainer, we're going to unpack a modern survival guide, pulling out the most crucial insights from the National Workshop on Academic Writing to help you navigate this wild new age of AI.
Yeah, this quote from the workshop really hits the nail on the head. We're not just talking about a few new tools or tricks. The very idea of what it means to be a scholar is being completely rewritten by technology. And the stakes? They couldn't be higher, because how we choose to adapt right now will literally shape the future of how knowledge is created.
You know, the folks at the workshop didn't frame this as some scary doomsday scenario. Instead, they talked about it as a scholarly renaissance, built around this idea of augmented intelligence. This isn't about humans versus machines. It's about creating a powerful new partnership, a collaboration where our human brainpower and artificial intelligence work together to do things we could never do before.
Okay, but let's be real. This new partnership, it's not all smooth sailing. A huge question at the workshop was how we handle this new, let's call it a war, between our own natural intelligence and these super powerful AI tools. The challenge is pretty clear. How do we use this incredible tech without, as one speaker bluntly put it, letting it rot our brains or take the place of the real deep thinking that scholarship is all about? So, how do we do that? Well, it all starts with getting back to basics. And that brings us to our first section, the core writing toolkit. Because before you can even think about mastering AI as a partner, you first have to master the timeless, fundamental skills of writing. At the core of all academic writing, there's this really fundamental difference we have to grasp. We're not creating the literature of power, the stuff that's all about emotion and creativity. We're working in the literature of knowledge. This demands what the workshop called a scientific temper, which is just a way of saying you've got to be objective, evidence-based, and leave the flowery language at the door. And that whole approach really stands on these four key pillars. There would give your work credibility. Formality shows you're a professional. Objectivity proves you followed the evidence, not your own opinions. And clarity and precision, well, they're the difference between saying something vague, like a long time ago, and providing a hard number, a specific data point that no one can argue with. Okay, that's the big picture, but how does this actually work? Paragraph by paragraph. The workshop gave a super simple but incredibly powerful tool for this, the pie structure. Every single paragraph needs to make a clear point, back it up with an illustration, that's your data, your quote, your evidence, and then give an explanation that ties it all back to your main argument. It's basically a foolproof recipe for perfect paragraphs. All right, now that we've got our foundation solid, it's time to tackle the big one, writing with artificial intelligence. In this next part, we're going to dive into how to actually work with this amazing, and sometimes tricky, new research companion. And this brings us to the million-dollar question, the one everyone at the workshop was talking about. AI is a fantastic tool, but what happens when it just makes stuff up? See, AI isn't a source of truth, it's a pattern matching machine. And if you don't get that difference, that's where things get really, really dangerous. There's a name for this danger, and you've probably heard it, AI hallucination. See, the AI isn't thinking. It's just a super-powered autocomplete, guessing the next word based on statistics. And sometimes it guesses wrong, really wrong. It can invent journal articles that don't exist, make up quotes, and create data that looks totally real but is complete fiction. And these are the big traps, the red herrings you've absolutely got to watch out for. First, there's citation hallucination, where the AI just creates fake references out of thin air. Then you've got algorithmic bias, which is a sneaky one. It means the AI often just repeats and even amplifies the human biases it learned from its training data. Your results could be totally skewed, and you might not even know it. So how in the world do you fight back against this stuff? Well, the workshop offered a great solution, the RTCC framework. This is all about you taking control of the conversation. By defining the AI's role, its specific task, the context of your project, and any constraints it needs to follow, you're not just vaguely asking for help. You're giving it very specific marching orders. It's how you use AI for the small stuff without letting it invent the important stuff. But at the end of the day, all these tricks and frameworks boil down to one single massive principle. You, the scholar, must always be the human in the loop. The workshop called it Vivek Buddhi, which basically means using your own judgment, your own discernment. You are the boss. You're the final authority. You can't just trust. You have to verify everything that comes out of that machine. Okay, so we've got the tools. We know how to write with integrity in this new age. But what's the point if nobody reads it, right? This brings us to part 3, publishing for global impact. Let's talk about how to get your work into those top-tier journals and actually get your voice heard. Well, it all starts with the structure. Think of the IMRaD format: introduction, methods, results, and discussion as the universal passport for your research paper. It's the global standard for a reason. It follows the logical path of scientific discovery, which means an editor anywhere in the world can immediately understand and respect your work. And inside that structure, your introduction is everything. It's your big first impression. For this, you can use the CARS model, which stands for Create a Research Space. It's like a 3-move checkmate for hooking your reader. First, you establish a territory, show why this topic matters. Then, you establish a niche, point out a specific gap in the research. And finally, you occupy the niche by showing exactly how your work fills that gap. And how do you prove you found a real gap? By showing you're plugged into the current conversation. That's why citing sources from the last 5 to 10 years isn't just a suggestion, it's pretty much a requirement. It's your way of telling editors, hey, I'm not just rehashing old news, I'm actively involved in what's happening in my field right now. All right, we've covered the tools, the tech, and the tactics. But this last part, it might be the most important piece of the puzzle. This isn't about what you write, it's about who you are. It's all about that internal mindset shift from being a student who just consumes knowledge to becoming an author who actually creates it. And a huge part of that shift is learning to say I. So many of us, especially early in our careers, hide behind phrases like, it can be seen that, or the study shows. But to really make an impact, you have to project authority. Using a phrase like I argue isn't about being arrogant, it's about being accountable. It's you, the scholar, standing behind your work and owning your contribution. Look, I get it. All of this can sound completely overwhelming. As one of the workshop participants said, at first it just felt like a dread of the burden. But what's amazing is how that feeling of dread was totally transformed into something wonderful. It just goes to show what happens when you decide to face these new challenges head on. So, when you boil it all down, these aren't just a bunch of boring rules you have to memorize. Think of them as the jet engine for your career. Mastering these skills, clarity, logical thinking, ethical AI use, and the confidence to own your voice, this is the stuff that can seriously launch you onto the global stage. And that leaves us with one last big question. A question for you. In this new world of augmented intelligence, where a machine can help with almost everything, what part of the human in your work are you going to protect? What's your unique insight, your critical judgment, your ethical compass? What's the thing that only you can bring to the table?